In American Farriers Journal's September-October 2025 issue, we kicked off a new and ambitious series called One Horse, One Farrier, 1 Year. This project which is made possible by Triple Crown Feed, follows a horse and its farrier for 1 year, chronicling details of its hoof care over 8 issues. As part of the series, the horse's farrier, International Horseshoeing Hall of Famer Esco Buff, and other guests will join us after each installment to discuss the horse, its hoof care, and what goes into the everyday decisions. Welcome, Esco, and thank you for joining us and taking on the project.
Welcome. Thank you. And my pleasure.
Great. A little bit of history on this. Several years ago, Frank Lessiter, AFJ's editorial director and chairman, and he started Shoeing for a Living, which is a feature we publish in AFJ, and it's a look at a day in the life of a farrier, what they go through during the course of the day. Over time, we've often heard farriers talk about how it's great to see a freshly finished foot when it's placed on the floor, but the real question that they like to see is what will it look like at the end of the cycle. So with that in mind, Mike Lessiter, AFJ's president, wanted to take it up a notch by following a horse for a year and document each farrier visit, as well as anything else that might pop up, as it often does with horses. Now, Jackson is the subject of this series, and as you put it, it's a living case study. Tell us about Jackson, what his job is, what's the climate like where he lives and works, and why he's ideal for this project.
First, I wanted to get a horse that wasn't an elite horse that a lot of farriers wouldn't be able to, that they wouldn't be servicing in their own farrier business. So I wanted to get an average horse, just a regular horse that most farriers would see on a day-to-day. I had several options. I also wanted to pick out a horse that I potentially knew could present us some problems and challenges over the course of a year, so other farriers could see how we deal with that and help them out. Jackson's in the southeast here. I travel up to him, and it's a different climate down here. We'll be discussing climate through the articles too, because I do farrier service pretty much up and down the eastern seaboard, and there's quite a difference between a horse of the same in New York, Pennsylvania, Vermont, as opposed to one in Georgia, Alabama, Florida. It creates extra challenges, something that I have always looked at as well when farriers talk about the type of shoes they use, the type of nails they use, and how they trim. It is not the same in my experience, or shouldn't be the same, as you're in different environments, because each has its own challenges. And so picking out Jackson, he's a draft mix, which is, again, a lot of people have mixed thoroughbreds and other breeds with these draft mixes, so they draft so they could end up with a little bit bigger horse who could potentially do a lot of different things. This horse isn't a dressage horse. It's not a jumper, hunter. It's just an average horse the person rides, does training level dressage, if you want to say, just to keep it in training, but rides Western, rides English, so it does all of that.
And what's it like working with Jackson's owners?
Jackson's owners is really open to it. Obviously, they're concerned about it going all over, so we keep their identity a little bit secret. But she has a good team of, the farrier, me, the veterinarian, and she's a very conscious owner. So if we recommend something, she's on it. We have great discussions. And so it's a very collaborative event. And I understand that doesn't always happen for farriers out in the real field. it sometimes doesn't happen, but for this article, it works out great because we can then present everything both from the veterinarian side, from the farrier side, and the horse owner side. And she has a person who works at the barn as well that takes care of the animals, and so um, it allows us to have a good communication between all of us.
And how important is that to have that dynamic where where the farrier, vet, and horse owner are all on the same page? That's got to be a dream come true.
Yeah, it is. It doesn't normally happen that way, but it's just the perfect horse to write the article on. Yeah, we could have one where we have other issues where maybe a farrier or a veterinarian who aren't playing in the sand very well and stuff, and we could do articles on that and how to deal with it. But this was more about the horse and the process and the communication. So we wanted to make it a very positive one. So Jackson works out perfect.
Now you've been Jackson's farrier for the past decade, so you're well versed in his history. What can you tell us about the challenges he faces, and how they influence his hoof care?
Well, it's a good thing that I've been doing them for a long time. So I've been trimming the horse for a long time. There were a couple times we put shoes on for minor things, but in essence, he's been pretty well barefoot for most of his life. The challenge is for us farriers is a heavier horse in wetter weather, softer environment creates different challenges where we end up with more flaring. We do have some minor pathology stuff, as in the first article we discussed the side bones, which it's a draft mix horse, so that's nothing unusual to necessarily find side bones, ring bone, things like that. Me being the farrier for quite some time at least means that I have a consistent knowledge of how the horse is and how its imbalances are, and any minor issues coming up. So the other reason for also choosing Jackson is I have some foresight that there's going to be some upcoming changes occurring. I don't want to get ahead of myself, as they say that, because we're an article ahead of the posting article, but I knew potentially there could be some issues that would help farriers out, mostly in the problem solving ability to be able to look at these things and problem solve.
Now, how does he based on the article, it sounds like he stands pretty well, and he's got a really nice demeanor about him.
Yeah, see, he does stand well. Some of these draft mixes, some farriers will have to put them in stocks to stand because they're more drafty. He is more drafty, larger, but the owner has trained him since he was young, and so when they got it, and so the horse stands really well. Yes, he's got a heavier leg and foot and stuff, but I also use cradle and hoof stand and things like that. So I help my body on out, but he's perfect in standing, except for when the flies are around. But we have fly spray to take care of that.
Yeah. Now you mentioned side bone, but he also has some endocrine related concerns as well.
Yeah, he does. It's in the article. He's hadn't had these issues, but sort of seeing the future, we knew because of being more of a drafty breed, he started to retain some fat over his eyes and on his neck and stuff. So his insulin and glucose levels have been being tested, and as well as his ACTH levels. And So the owner has been managing some of that. His glucose and insulin levels have been quote unquote in the normal range. But he's also having some higher ACTH. And so we'll be dealing with some of that in future articles as well. Discussion of how that, how we're going to proceed with that, how the veterinarians are going to proceed with that as well. And we'll be involving some other people in that discussion as well.
Now, as we all know, nutrition is vital for hoof quality, but it's particularly important with this metabolic history. So, how are you, his vet, and the horse owners helping to manage him in that way?
Yeah, the vets have discussions with the owner. There's certified nutritionists involved as well. I probably, because of my knowledge with a lot of it, spearhead a lot of it and direct a lot of it to the different individuals, as well as document everything. I always have, but even now with this article, document the feed, what's occurring, how often, in order uh, just to make sure that they're not doing too much or too little. But this owner is completely compliant with everything, which is a joy. Um, with that, I'd rent a stall just to have her take care of me. She does that well.
Yeah, yeah. Um, Off track a little bit. You had discussed, you had just mentioned documenting things, and you know, over the years, I've talked with different farriers, and they're interested in documenting for a number of reasons, whether it's to keep track of the horse, or for potential research purposes, or to write articles and whatnot. So, what advice would you have for those people to improve their documentation and sort of go in that direction with research, or for their just everyday uh,
Yeah,
work?
it's really important. And it's not just the horse. Uh, Fortunately, many years ago, I've been at this for 52 years this year. I was involved with a lawsuit where I was had to give testimony of what I had witnessed and stuff. And so there's a lot of things in documentation I think farriers are lacking in and need to do better in. And one is documenting every clinic that you went to, dates, and how many hours. If you were ever involved in a lawsuit, they're going to want to say, okay, what's your experience? And you're going to say this and that. And they're going to say, okay, prove that you went to these things, or, here's a list. And I know some organizations do that already. And then when it comes to the horse, I fortunately had a mentor that kept on 3x5 cards in a little index box, used to keep notes on the horse all the time. So they knew exactly what was going on with balances, imbalances, any medical issues. So they could provide farrier work or corrective. Luckily, now some people do this in their own software program. Some people do it on paper. I uh, I got hooked up with the Backroads Data and the Forge Ahead program, which is phenomenal for me because I can input pictures and radiographs into it. But it's whatever program you use, it's about what you put into it. So if you just say trimmed horse and this was the cost, then that's all you get. So you actually have to physically take the time to input um, data into it. So, and I get a readout that I bring to the appointment with me. And that's real important because as I track the horse, if all of a sudden his imbalance is, let's just say he normally is inside, outside, high in both front and hind feet, and all of a sudden he changes, I'll want to know why. And a lot of times it's training changes. The horse is doing something different. Or it could be a sign that the horse is starting to weight bear on more than one leg, that there may be an issue upcoming on another leg or a diagonal. So it can give you some insight into potential problems, or maybe it's just a one-off. But the whole documentation process to me is extremely important, because when I show up at a barn, I have a readout of that horse for a year. I only do a year at a time. And I sit down with the owner before I even touch the horse and say, okay, what's changed? Here's what we noted last time. Is there any differences, pros and cons? And then we evaluate the horse. So it takes time, but it's something horse owners like, that they know that their farrier is documenting all this.
Yeah, it's professional, it's thorough, I'd imagine it's something that the clients would really,
Yeah, they enjoy it.
yeah, yeah. Tell us about his feet. Let's start with the sole. What have you noticed any issues with the sole at all?
His soles have been fairly normal now. Both myself and the veterinarian shoot radiographs on them. At times, I do it more often. As the farrier, the vet is usually doing it a couple times a year. His sole depth has remained greater than 15 millimeters, which is ideal. When his feet get really soft, he'll get a little thinner in the sole, a little retracted a little bit, but it's been manageable without any issues. His hoof wall is usually really good. Slight flares in the quarters that have to be addressed each time. He is a draft mix, so he pretty much walks on his frog all the time, which is really nice. Doesn't experience really any thrush. Occasionally, he'll be a little tiny thrushy in a hind foot, and the staff gets on that and takes care of that. But fairly minor stuff to address with this horse. Toes will sometimes get a little longer, and we have to bring them back a little bit, just because they get a little stretched up front.
What about his conformation? How does it sound?
His posture is pretty good. He does have a little bit more weight bearing on his left front foot, and a little bit different weight bearing on the hind leg. As discussed in the article, he had an injury back there that affected him a little bit with weight bearing and everything. So his posture ends up pretty good. His right scapula is slightly lower a little bit, giving him just a slight functionally shorter leg. Other than that, he's put together pretty well.
Now, he's had a few issues over the years that requires a veterinarian. Tell us about his stifle injury and how you and the veterinarian have worked to help him.
Mostly, the owner did report that he was tentative in his hind, or pushing off that leg. I probably noticed it long before that, and would mention, and it really has to do with farrier work. When I would pick up the opposite leg where he's weight bearing on that leg, he couldn't stand quite as long on that leg, and he would be more wanting to have his leg back. So I had to give him breaks and stuff. So it took a while for the veterinarians with different first x-rays and then MRIs and stuff to come up with that meniscus tear and stuff like that. So it took a while, but it explained why the horse started to not want to stand as well behind. And so then making the suggestion to the veterinarian that, and to the owner, that we may need to go deeper in investigating it. And so that's what they did, first radiographically, ultrasounds and things like that.
One Horse, One Farrier, 1 year is made possible by Triple Crown Feed. Support your horse's performance with super premium horse feeds you can rely on. Discover the benefits of Triple Crown Nutrition at triplecrownfeed.com. And now back to the conversation. And your history with him probably helped quite a bit in recognizing that. But with farriers who might not have a track record with a horse, they're not always trying to be pukes when they're they're pulling their legs. They're trying to tell you something a lot of times. So how important is horsemanship in this sort of?
It's really important, and we get some real dinks at times for horses, and it's a behavioral issue, no doubt. But it's the toughest part of a farrier's career, especially since I remember reading a statistic several years ago, and I think AFJ did it, about the number of farriers that entered the farrier profession that had no horse experience beforehand. And it was a high number. I was stunned by the number. And I think horsemanship and being raised around horses allows you to be able to do that better, to be able to say, okay, that's behavioral, that's more pain related. But I think initially, a lot of times as farriers, you jump right to the horse as the issue when they're really trying to communicate something. And it could be that the owner didn't put them in the correct position, and you as a farrier picked up their legs and they're not standing very well, and so they get tired. Or it could be that they're sore in muscles from being overworked the day before or that morning. That's the part that takes some experience in working around horses, which is why a lot of farriers will suggest that if you have less experience, go to the barn and hang out when they're riding and see how they're supposed to move and what is normal with the horse. As we work with a horse more and more, we get to figure that out. No different than, your friend or something, when they're having a bad day and a good day. So when we work more with horses, we can determine that. But that is a challenge for newer or younger farriers or farriers without horsemanship skills.
Yeah. You also mentioned he had developed side bone. When did that become apparent? And lead us through through his challenges with it and how his hoof care has evolved since.
Yeah, not sure. Probably it was around 7 or 8 when the first radiographs were done that confirmed some side bones. And it's not shocking because it's being a draft. It's sort of the normal MO is, okay, they're going to have side bones kind of deal. He was a little later. So I think I'd have to for sure check my records, but I think he was closer to 8-9 years when he started to develop that. So normally we do see it starting when they're younger, and it's not surprising. We just monitor it. So as we've taken radiographs of that, we noticed that it rapidly took off, and then it hasn't changed at all. So radiographs over the last 5 years, the side bones are exactly the same. So they've not, it seems to have stabilized and not gotten any worse. And that's where in Dyson's radiology book, there's information on how to grade side bones. It's really important that a farrier knows how to grade them. In one essence is if you get the radiographs, then you can determine if it's stable by the grading system or no, it's getting worse. Not that a lot of that is in the control of the farrier, but the therapeutic farrier work or treatment that you may do or how you trim them may be in your wheelhouse to be able to do something to relieve those areas.
What do you attribute the stabilization of that side bone to?
He wasn't shod for it, and he wasn't trimmed really any different. I just think it's having draft blood in you. So we hadn't done anything different. We were planning on doing something different, like, okay, let's get some side bone shoes on, or let's do trim them differently. They were pretty bilateral on each side, and the which was good in my book. In the essence, it's the same pretty much on each side. If a side bone was more on one side considerably, or just on one side, let's just say medially, that would have been much more concerning to me, because that would have been more of an imbalance or a limb deviation, issues that I would have to then really look at hard. But these were fairly uniform, going the same direction, so it just seemed to be more, it's a draft.
Yeah. Now, more recently, I think it was within the last 3 years, Jackson's been transitioned to barefoot. What went into that decision?
Um, the owner, we weren't seeing any great change in the feet, in his movement. He happened to bust up his foot. He did yank a shoe off and bust up his foot. And it was like, okay, well, we can use acrylics and glues and stuff like that. And it was like, well, we're not seeing any great change with the way he's moving anymore. Why don't we just pull the shoes and trim them up, and I'll come back if he needs shoes on. And so he moved differently in the beginning, for the first couple of weeks, and then he was fine. So it was like, all right, this is working. The neat thing about this owner is she has one other horse that I do there, and I have probably trimmed and shod this horse with multiple different trimming and shoes, from glue-ons, steel, copper alloy, aluminum, different types of shoes, and they'll go great for 3 to 6 months to a year, and then all of a sudden not, and then we try something different and it works. So she's already used to this problem solving, let's work through and kind of issue, which is fortunate for me with Jackson, is I can do that with him as well.
Yeah. How does that, some farriers might wonder how you communicate that with a horse owner, because sometimes they're not always amenable to that sort of thing,
Yeah.
where it's problem solving.
I have a different way of dealing. I'm pretty blunt and to the point, and have discussions with people. The whole thing, going back to when I first arrive at the barn, I sit down and I ask them how the horse is doing, what pros and cons. And sometimes they may say, well, after you trimmed him, he didn't move well. He moved lame for for 3 or 4 days. And I'll be, instead of taking that as a personal attack that some farriers do, it'll be like, all right, now I got to figure out why he did that, because we can't have that. We need to not repeat that. Let me see. And, and I get history of it. Okay, it only did 3 days. All right. Probably I took off a little too much in an area or something. So it's just an open communication that you have. Now, as a farrier, you have to be willing to put a few extra minutes in the day with each horse owner to do that. That becomes, I think, some farriers' challenge, because they're going from horse to horse to horse, and they don't have that time.
Mm-hmm.
When you do more therapeutic farrier work, where you're just coming in working on lameness cases mostly, I may end up spending an hour in discussions with the owner for an hour's worth of work on the horse. But those discussions and communication, I think, is vital to being able to have successful conversations with an owner about these things. Okay, this is what I'm seeing, and then giving them options. It's like, well, there's these 6 options for dealing with this. I'm going to give them in the order that I see the most experience with and I like. And then we'll have a conversation about what, why and what works and what their choice is. But you have to spend the time to have that communication. And I know that can be challenging for farriers.
Sure. Yeah. What role has radiography played in how you trim the horse?
Well, the neat thing is, as being one of a half a dozen farriers, I have our own X-ray equipment and registered in multiple states. Is it allows me to have uh, an upper hand of pulling radiographs before I trim and shoe a horse, so I can make changes or confirm or not what's been going on. So that's really helpful. With Jackson, it's helpful to have radiographs done every so often to confirm sole depth, so we're not getting too thin. Because one time he did get thin, and it was not in his best interest. Also, to monitor any pathological changes, and so then we can then have the veterinarian follow up on that. Because I share my radiographs with the veterinarians as well. The attending vet gets the copies of them, so they can look at it and also let the owner know what they're seeing and what we may need to do differently to alter stuff as well. So it's an important tool. It's like a hoof tester. If you didn't have a hoof tester, it makes it harder to determine different things. So it's a powerful tool. Not obviously available to many farriers because of the cost of the equipment and stuff, but that's where farriers can also recommend to owners at least yearly radiographs, DPs and laterals, so they can see how to alter their trimming and shoeing, or even more than that. Now, I know some farriers work on chronic foundered horses, and they're guessing at where things are, and they'll try this and they'll try that, and the owner's not willing to do the radiographs, but the farriers need to relay how important it is because they're working blind of they don't know what's going on in the foot for sure. And if I have the radiograph, I'd be able to know what's going on and be able to possibly provide more comfort for your horse. But we have to demand it and tell them the importance of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Jackson's on a 5-week trim schedule.
Yes.
When did this start? When did you start that cycle?
I've always been on this horse with a 5-week schedule. Most of my horses in my realm are, if they're laminitic, they're 3 or 4 weeks. If they're not, they're on 5 weeks. I don't have a single horse I do at 6 weeks. I just found, for me, and then educating owners, that anything past 5 weeks, there's too much changes that are occurring with toe length and distortions and stuff, that between 4 and 5 weeks is the ideal for dealing with that and not having to do a lot of changes in the horse's foot, but enough to deal with things.
How do you educate your clients to do that? Because it's sometimes it's not that easy.
Well, it isn't, and once in a while we'll get a phone call from someone who'll say, "Well, I do my horses every 8 weeks," and I'll just say, "Okay, I'm not your farrier."
Yeah.
And a lot of it, horse owners who ride sort of understand this. They understand how things change and how the horse moves. They'll notice that when the horse is first done, they move different than towards the end of it. And the goal is to not have that much of a noticeable thing. So it's really education. Having a research PhD in business, it helps me study research, but I take in all that stuff and I got files on my computer so I can share them with the owners of, like Renee Weller's research and other people's research of what are the detriment of, toe length or other issues. So I'm educating them. I'm spending the time so they become more of an educated consumer, which I want because then it makes my job easier to deal with. I want to come in and fine tune their horse, like turning the knobs on an old radio to get a better reception. So they get a better ride and a sounder horse for longer. It's no different than auto mechanics. If you don't change your oil every so often, well, your car isn't going to make it as long as if you do it every 3,000 or 4,000 miles.
Right. Right. So now previously, before transitioning to barefoot, Jackson was shod to manage a few issues like wall breakage, and there was some. You wanted to protect his concavity and also to support the stifle injury. How are some of these things being managed now? I know the stifle might not be as much of an issue now.
Right.
How are they being managed now?
The stifle does have a little effect because if he's fired up back there or if it's bothering him, he will then place more weight on the opposite diagonal front foot and it'll distort more. The main reason for getting in the shoes to begin with had to do with being thinner sole. He was starting to flatten out. Now, some of that is sort of being a draft breed too. They tend to be a little flatter, don't have the concavity of it. So, and the ground was hard during that time. So we wanted to get him up, get some vertical height and get him up off the ground so he wasn't going to be sore because it went from wet to dry fairly quickly. And the owner was going to be doing some different training work on them. And so we wanted to support that. And we didn't want the side bones to get any worse if they were potentially worse. So we got them in a regular shoe so we could protect the foot from breaking up, and then rolled, ground out the sides of the shoe to make it sort of an enrollment shoe that the animal could go in whatever direction. That we quickly changed because he continued to go straight over the toe no matter what. So we were wasting our time on by doing that. There was he pretty much breaks over the center, the breakover points in the center of the foot. So that's good.
Yeah. Now you're hard at work on the second installment of the series. Can you give us a sneak peek without giving away too much on the next installment?
Yes, the next installment involves 2 farrier visits within 2 weeks apart from each other. We now had to transition him to something on his feet for another issue that has arisen, which you will see in the radiographs. So so you'll see how we came upon that decision and what to do. And then, this is he's got like a size 6-7 foot. So as any farrier that deals with a larger foot, our options become less of what is available out to us other than, size 1-2 shoe kind of deal. So we have to have that discussion in the article as well as what's available for what we want to do. And a lot of Rube Goldberg thinking and options put out there. And it's a conversation with the vet, myself, and the owner of what direction the owner wants to go in. I can go in multiple directions, so that conversation will be discussed as well.
That's a great place to wrap this up. Thank you so much for joining us today, sir.
My pleasure. Look forward to everyone reading the articles.
We're looking forward to that as well. I also want to thank Triple Crown Feed for generously making this series possible. For Esco Buff, Triple Crown Feed, and American Farriers Journal, thank you for joining us.